Prompt engineering is the process of designing the input text or the prompt that a model such as GPT-3 will use to generate its output. The quality and effectiveness of this output is dependent upon the design of your prompt, so it's important to understand how to craft a good prompt for GPT-3. In this tutorial, we will explore the basics of prompt engineering for GPT-3. We'll discuss how to perform common natural language processing tasks on financial text, including data extraction, named entity recognition, sentiment analysis, and text classification. Let's get started. The first task we'll discuss is data extraction. So data extraction is the process of extracting structured text out of big long blob of unstructured data. So in the last video, we processed an earnings transcript. So we took the earnings call from NVIDIA, right? And we summarized it and basically compressed it down to a shorter version of the call that had all the key points. Now, what we want to do with data extraction here is try to extract some more insight out of this, try to extract maybe some numbers, some people, places, keywords, all kinds of different data, and pull that out of the text without writing some custom Python parser. We're just going to use GPT-3's natural language processing capabilities to pull this data out for us, and we just need to prompt it the right way. So to learn how to use these prompts, we're going to use the OpenAI Playground. So you just go to openai.com, you can log in and you click on Playground, and you'll be able to input some text here as a prompt and submit it and see what GPT-3 returns. So to demonstrate data extraction task, we need some text to operate on. So if you didn't follow the last tutorial, video 3, I recommend you do that. But if you're too lazy to do that, I've included the text of the transcript right here off the website, and you can copy it, or you can find your own copy of the transcript. This is the summary that I'll be operating on. So this is a summary of the transcript. I could include the entire transcript, but there's an input limit on the amount of text data you can process in GPT-3 all at once. In the last video, I told you how to take the entire transcript and divide it into chunks and make multiple API calls and then summarize it and collate the responses into a single longer summary. So if you like the output on the summary that we're operating on here, you can technically chunk up the document and send the same prompt for chunks of the text and process the entire document. So I've pasted in the earnings call transcript summary that we generated right here. And now above this, I'm just going to start using some prompts and see what GPT-3 returns. And you'll find it's very easy to return some very useful data. So the first data extraction task we'll perform is named entity recognition. And so this is a common natural language task that you may have heard about before. And there's various Python libraries for this, like Python's NLTK, so the natural language toolkit. And there's also Spacey, which is used for text processing as well, and they have named entity recognition functionality. But you can use GPT-3 for this by just typing some prompts. And so let's try these prompts. So I'm going to take this prompt right here and put it right above this text right here, and I'm going to click submit and see what it does in the playground. And so just like that, I say extract named entities, and look at that. Named entities: Simona Jankowski, Colette Kress, NVIDIA, RTX 4090, JSON Huang, AI, China, Jensen, Q4 2021, internet service companies, cloud computing providers, and blockchain. So you can recognize these are named entities. So those are company names. That's a product name. That's the CEO's name. Those are various people on the call. I believe the CFO is on there. And there's a quarter here, and then there's like a sector or type of company. So cloud computing providers, internet service companies, and blockchain. So that right there is pretty cool that we can just take this big long blob of text and extract all these named entities out of it. So you might say to yourself, sure, that's useful. You could extract these named entities, and that might be useful for like a keyword search or a way to do tagging and linking documents together, but these are kind of jumbled all together, right? So that's a person, that's a product, that's a sector, so that's not very organized. Well, if you know about prompting, you can organize this a little bit better. So what happens if we say extract people, job titles, and product names from the following text? So we're kind of giving a little bit more data of what we want. And so we're learning how to prompt it and be a little bit more specific. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to delete this one here, and I'm going to submit that and see what it says now. And you can see it's able to figure out how to categorize and classify all these things. So I say how I want to classify it here: people, job titles, and product names. And so now I have the people: Simona Jankowski, Colette Kress, Jensen, We got job titles, so we got the CFO and the CEO, and we have the product names. So we have the RTX 4090, which is an upcoming graphics card. We have the Ada Lovelace GPU architecture that's coming out, NVIDIA GPUs, and blockchain. Now, if we don't just care about people, we want some just keywords so that we can build some kind of document tagging and classification system or organizing system where we can get a big corpus of documents and put them all on a searchable website. We might be able to search by keyword or have documents linked together. We can do a prompt like this and just extract all of the keywords from the text. And so if I type this in the playground and try this out, you can see it'll get us some additional keywords that we might not have picked up before. And so we get words like general purpose computing, cloud purchases, large installations, internet service companies, software licenses. And you can see a lot of these are businesses that NVIDIA is involved in and ways that they generate revenue. And it might be worth it to dive into some of these, kind of double click on these a little more and see, cloud purchases from where? What are other companies that are connected to NVIDIA? Who are they using to produce all these semiconductor, right? And you'll find like Taiwan Semiconductor makes everything, and GPU instance hours, and think about how there's going to be a huge growth in all these machine learning companies and them using GPUs by the hour in cloud computing environments to train these machine learning environments. And so you can kind of parse through this and think, and maybe even figure out some investment ideas and themes here that you might not have picked up if you don't have time to go through all these earnings transcripts, or you don't want to just take someone else's word for it. Now you might say named entities, keywords, who cares? I'm a numbers person. I care all about the numbers. And so the other type of data that we can extract is financial information. So how do we extract all the key financial information and numbers from the text? Well, it can do that too. So we can do something like extract all financial numbers from the following text. And let's see what it produces here. So I'm going to put that in and tell it to find me all the numbers in the text. 5.93 billion, 12%, 17%, 1%, 31%, lots of percentages and $1 million numbers here. And so, it's cool that it can find all the numbers, even if there's a percent sign or a million and billion next to it, and it knows that context. But that output there is not very useful to me. And so I need to figure out how to make my prompt a little more specific and a little bit better to be able to extract the meaning of all these numbers. And so I can modify that prompt, right, and say, extract all financial numbers and what they represent in the following text. And so GPT-3 relies on these prompts, and you got to be more specific and talk to it and tell it what you mean, and it'll usually do a pretty good job of finding what you want. But if you're just vague about it and you don't know how to communicate, then you're not going to get exactly what you want. And so one of the things you'll find with prompt engineering, I've watched a few other YouTube videos where people have talked about this, is that being good with language and being able to explain and communicate is going to be a very valuable skill for having these models do what you want. And while it's very valuable to know all the advanced math and how to train your own models and have that academic background, what you'll find is this is providing nice little shortcuts for us to just communicate with this model as a service, as they're calling it. There's software as a service where you pay by the month, but now there's these models as a service that you can just use. And if you can communicate and ask these models the right questions, then it becomes very simple to get the answers and meaning you want. And so it's very empowering. So there's going to be very creative individuals who have ideas for startups, financial products, etc., who know how to use language and can come up with ways to combine their own domain expertise. So maybe they're an expert in finance or music and art, and they can use these as kind of a superpower to allow them to perform tasks really, really quickly. And so I can say, extract all financial numbers and what they represent, and all of a sudden, look at this, financial numbers. I have $5.93 billion revenue for Q3 2021. I have my sequential growth in data center revenue, year-on-year growth. And so we know there's a large decline in gaming revenue, both sequential decline and year-on-year decline. We see the inventory change. And also we have this description here. And so I was curious about this inventory charge, for instance, and where did that come from? Inventory charge due to expected changes in demand for China data centers. So that's pretty cool right there. And if I want to prompt it a bit more and get this output to look a little bit differently, like that seems a bit redundant, but we can prompt this and be more and more more specific to get this data exactly how we want. And so when you think about it, providing this type of service where you can summarize a document in an article form, you can have it write or rewrite an article for different levels of audience, and you can extract these key points and numbers. Does that put someone out of a job? Maybe it does if it's not automated already. If you've ever been to CNBC or Motley Fool or any types of these investment websites that have all these ads popping up all over them, so you got excellent, become a member, pay for this. Do I need these people, right? They say data center growth remains strong. Sure enough, I know that data center growth was strong. I just asked a GPT. Key points, oh, look at that. I know all of the key points. I've extracted the keywords, right? And oh, tell me more about this EPS and revenue of 5.93 billion. Oh, I knew this because GPT-3. Did I need someone to write this article? Did a person write this article? I'm sorry, Kif, I don't want to offend the person that wrote this article, but yeah, if you did this, GPT-3 can definitely do this job. It talks about China right here, and I already know that, and all I did is type a few words that I copied from this YouTube video, and I got all this information right there. So that's pretty cool, right? Another useful bit of information you might want to extract involves dates. So you can extract all dates and what they represent. And so I found this useful because it talks about which quarter they're referring to, but also it gives you the release date of certain products. So you can see in mid-October is when the RTX 49 becomes available. And you can also see what they think about the fourth quarter. So they're expecting that to be stronger in Q4 due to the upcoming holidays. So expect a lot of sales there. And then the third quarter, they talk about the inventory charge, right? So if we want to bucket this and summarize it in a lot of different ways, whether by person, place, thing, or time, we can do this all with GPT-3. Now, while it's very cool to be able to get this natural language response, and have it type back to me, you might say, well, this is a computer programming channel. This is a Python programming channel. So, what is a computer program going to be able to do with this? Well, what if we're able to return this output not just as a list here as natural language? What if we can format this output in such a way that a computer can understand it, or we can import it into a spreadsheet? Well, good news is GPT-3 is very well aware of how to return structured output if you just tell it to do that. And so right here, I have prompting for structured output. So if you'll remember, we did named entity recognition and we asked it to extract people, job titles, and product names. But if I say return the response as a bulleted list, it'll return it just like that as a bulleted list. So you see the people, you see the job titles, and you see these different product names, which is very useful right there. But what if I want to return this in a CSV format? What can I do? So I can tell it to do that as well. And maybe I want to import some data to a spreadsheet. And if I want to go further, I can tell it the exact columns and structure of the CSV file as well. And so you can see we have a comma separated list right here. But more interesting than that, on this channel, we often work with JSON format. And so what I can do is say extract all the people, job titles, and product names and return it in JSON format. And it'll do that for me just like this. So now look, we have a JSON object right here. And then you can see it's created a key for each category automatically. So I have a key for people, and that's the people. Notice Ada Lovelace is in there, who is actually associated with the product name there. So that one's kind of a weird special case. We got the job titles, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, CEO, and we have the product names. And these are all in lists that are under keys for each category, which is pretty nice because now I could actually run a Python program call the OpenAI API on this document, and I can obtain a response in JSON format, parse this out, and maybe populate a database or do something else with it. So as a programmer, if I'm using ChatGPT or GPT-3 as my pair programmer performing these tasks for me, I might have a little bit of feedback. Maybe I don't want this capitalization in people or this space in job title, right? These keys are kind of difficult. Furthermore, these job titles are actually associated with people. So why do I have this list of 2 job titles down here and list of 4 people up there? That's not really exactly what I want. So the one thing that I found pretty mind-blowing is that I can provide a specific example of the output. And so what we've done so far is give it a prompt. So we've given it a prompt and told it to do something, and we didn't give it any examples. And so you'll hear these terms like zero-shot learning. So you're not giving it any examples. You're just giving a prompt and getting something back. But we can also do is give it some examples of what you want. And so after this text, what I can do here is return the response right here. And so I'm just going to type an example of the response I actually want as a programmer and see what GPT-3 does with it. So I have my prompt, I have my text, and down here, I'm going to say, instead of that capital one, I'm going to say people, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a list of people, and I want a list of objects here, and I want a key for the person's name. So I'm going to call it a name, and then I'm going to just leave an empty string right there. And then I'm also going to do a job title. So I'm going to see if it can associate the job title with the person's name automatically from that test and return it as a list of objects. And then I'm going to say, products. And so I'm going to say products down here. And then this one, I just want a list, and I'll just leave that list empty, right? And so let me submit this and see what it does. And this is pretty amazing, right? I have the people and their role in the call right there, and they're grouped into this list of objects. So I have the name, Simona Jankowski, and the job title. And there wasn't a job title in the summary that I put here, but her role, I guess, in the call was welcoming everyone to the NVIDIA third quarter earnings call. So that is included as the job title. Colette Kress, Executive Vice President and CFO. Jen Sun, which is NVIDIA CEO. And then we have the products. And it's pretty cool since I guess Ada Lovelace didn't have a job title. It included it as a product. So it was able to figure out that Ada Lovelace GPU architecture wasn't, Ada Lovelace wasn't a person in this particular case when I framed my prompt that way. I have GPUs, enterprise software stack, and the dynamic computing environment and RTX 4090. So that's pretty awesome that I can get that structured data like that. And so when you think about it, what we could do is like build our own custom API, or we could build this pipeline that automatically pulls all of the different earnings transcripts, SEC filings, all these other financial documents. We can push them to some queue, process them, ask GPT questions, get the structured output, and populate a database, build some search engine, build our own CNBC.com, and run our own news service. We just need to know how to craft these specialized prompts, parse the output with Python, send API requests the right way to the OpenAI API, and how to use a pipeline. And I'm going to talk about databases and hooking all that up as well. And we can build very complex things and have it solve a lot of these problems for us so that we don't have to worry about, I don't know how to do natural language processing or build my own model to extract sentiment and all these things. I'll just have GPT-3 do that part for me and then build my idea that I have in my head. Now, speaking of applications and databases, we've built many web apps, we've built mobile apps and trading bots and financial price databases on this channel. How would we go about building a database with all of this information? Well, ChatGPT or GPT-3 has an answer. It can actually generate SQL statements. So we've talked about GPT-3 and Codex being a subset that is trained on code, and we talked about these example output formats. I've provided a prompt here. Extract people and product names from the following text. Return an SQL database structure for storing this data. So let's say we wanted to design this database for us. Like we want a database for storing people and product names for earnings calls. So we process them in mass and we want a database and we don't know how to design it. Or maybe we want to store open, high, low, close volume, technical indicators, all those types of things people are interested in. And we want it to return that database structure because we don't know how to do it. We know how to do it, but we want to take shortcuts here, right? And look at that. We got table one. It says suggest create table one called people. And we have some column names. So we have person ID and name. And then so the person ID there is the primary key. 1, 2, 3, and we got the names right there, the product ID, product name. And so that's the start of some suggestions on how to design this database. And we could probably craft this and refine a bit more to actually generate the SQL statements. So I kind of had it mock a database design for me right there. But I also have a prompt here where I say extract people and product names from the following text, return a SQL insert statements to populate a database with this information. So let's say I want actual SQL, and let me fix this, return SQL insert statements, just like that. And so let's say we designed the database. Now we want it to actually populate it. There you go. Insert into people. So it inserts into the name column, the values, Simona. So it knows, not only does it not, it doesn't generate 3 insert statements for people. It actually uses, it has some knowledge of SQL. And so it knows it can just do commas like this. So these are 3 different records, and it inserts into product. So a product name. So it uses a product name column, RTX 390, it's so on and so forth. And so we're able to actually generate code here. So this is SQL code that we were able to generate that came out of extracting information from this document. And so we have a database design and a data loader that we're able to generate just using this natural language that we wrote right here. And in the next video, I'm going to use ChatGPT as a pair programmer to actually write Python programs. So we'll be able to prompt it to write Python programs and parse documents and build a crawler. And then we could even combine this database stuff and crawl the web and extract data and populate that into a database. We could generate a Flask web application and build a front end for that. And I'll explore pair programming and walk you through that. I already have a whole tutorial written on that I'm going to do right after this. So that's pretty badass. We learned a lot just by taking that transcript that we did in the last video and just running a bunch of commands on it and seeing what we can do with GPT-3. What else did we do? Well, we have that fed speech, right? We can probably do something interesting with the fed speech. So I'm going to talk about sentiment analysis and text classification using prompts, and we're going to operate on that. So now you can kind of see, some people are like, well, what's the point of transcribing this fed transcript that already exists? Or what's the point of this summary? Well, these lessons that I'm making here, I have a thought process of showing you these smaller, simpler building blocks, and then we're gradually putting them together into larger and larger things and applying those concepts to what we did in the last video. And these are going to build until we have entire applications. And so the reason why we transcribe the Fed is to demonstrate OpenAI Whisper and speech recognition. And the reason why we did an earnings call summary is so we had a small chunk of text to work on that we could do a natural language processing task on. So now we're going to demonstrate sentiment analysis and text classification on the Fed speech using GPT-3. So let's go ahead and do that. So this year, 2022, Jerome Powell has said some words that have caused the markets to react in a very negative way, at least in the short term. And so we used OpenAI Whisper to perform speech recognition on the audio of one of his live streams. And so naturally, some people in the comments were like, well, how do we further analyze this text? I want to do sentiment analysis, or we want to figure out whether he was dovish or hawkish, classify this. And, you know, we have a bunch of degenerates on the channel, so they naturally want to trade on this piece of text. And so let's see what GPT-3 says about this bit of text. Do we need to train some special model, or can it figure out the sentiment or how to classify Jerome Powell's text without us doing much or writing much code? So let's check it out here. And so what can we do with this? Well, sentiment analysis, as you probably know, is a way of classifying speech or text as positive or negative. So it's pretty generic here. So you can say, oh, this is positive sentiment or negative sentiment, right? And so we can do something very generic here. And so I have a prompt here that says, analyze the sentiment of the following text. And so if I just put that, this will give a pretty simple answer here. So I can do this, but then we can craft more complex prompts to do more complex things, right? And so it says the sentiment of this text is neutral. The speaker is outlining the actions, so emphasizing these. So it kind of does a little summary and says the sentiment of this text is neutral. So this type of sentiment analysis isn't very useful to me, but let's try a little bit more. Let's say, return a list of the sentiment of each sentence in the following text. And so let's do this and provide an example of exactly what we want, because that seems like garbage to me. So I'm going to say return this. And remember, we said we can provide some type of example of the output we want. And so what I'm going to do, there's the text, and I'm going to say I want a pipe delimited table here. And I'm going to say I want this numbered. Remember, we returned a pandas data frame. And so we got the text from OpenAI Whisper, we got price data, we populated a pandas data frame with price data, and we knew the start and end timestamps, and then we populated the sentences in the pandas data frame just to go crazy. So let's number these sentences and then say we want the sentiment next to the text for each. So not only do we want to classify the whole thing, we want sentiment of each sentence. So I'm going to do that. And look at that. Good afternoon. Good afternoon is a very positive way to start, right? It starts pretty positive here, and then it says negative. Restoring price stability will likely require maintaining restrictive stance of policy for some time. Negative. That sounds pretty negative. I'll have more to say. That's neutral, not positive or negative, right? And so positive and negative, like this is kind of cool that it's able to break it down by sentence, so it knows to divide it by sentence, analyzes each of those individually, and says positive or negative. And so it seems to be working sort of okay. Now, this sentiment analysis of positive or negative to me isn't that useful or interesting right here. Positive and negative sentiment is useful for like restaurant reviews and stuff like that. So I could organize all the Yelp reviews and say, oh, this is a positive review, put it over here. And some people just want to read negative reviews about a restaurant or a movie or whatever. But a lot of people, when they're trying to trade on this or make financial decisions and they're making short-term decisions based on this, they're interested in whether Jerome Powell is hawkish or not. And they're updating these plots of where they think interest rates are going to be. And so they want to know, is he dovish? Is he hawkish, right? Or is, some of these statements are just neutral. So what we can do here is a text classification. So look at this prompt I have here. Classify each sentence in the following text as neutral or hawkish. So I just want to know whether he's hawkish or not. And I say return the hawkish sentences in JSON format. And so I'm giving it a format of the response. And I say, I want a list of all the sentences and their classification right here. And I just want the hawkish sentences. I paste that in, classify each sentence, return hawkish in JSON format. And I tell it an example of the response I want. Let's see if it can figure it out. Boom, just like that. What's hawkish here? Today, the FOMC raised our policy interest rate by 75 basis points. That's hawkish. We're moving our policy stance purposefully to a level that will be sufficiently restrictive to return inflation to 2%. Hawkish. Restoring price stability will likely require maintaining a restrictive policy stance for some time. Hawkish. Today's meeting, the committee raised the target range by 75 basis points, continuing the process of significantly reducing the size of our balance sheet to play an important role in firming the stance of monetary policy. Also hawkish. It will take time, however, and what we want to do is increase the token length since this is a pretty long input and response. I'm going to run this one more time with a higher token length. So these are the input parameters on the side, which we haven't talked about much yet since we haven't needed them, but we'll be experimenting them as we do more complex things. So that's how you increase the maximum length that it returns. It will take time, however, for the full effects of monetary restraint to be realized, especially on inflation. We will stay the course until the job is done. Jerome Powell is not fucking around right here. And so if we look in our second video on OpenAI Whisper, we looked at the sentences that led to this particular decline. And indeed, we pinpointed here, we anticipate ongoing increases in minus 0.33% in 5 seconds at a time at some point, significant uncertainty, so on and so forth. And so you can see GPT-3 did a pretty good job here of taking all these sentences and returning whether they are hawkish or not. So if you want to take my OpenAI Whisper code from the previous video that processes audio data and you want to hook it up to a microphone, so run the live stream whenever Jerome Powell is talking, you can actually hook that up to the microphone, feed it through in chunks, transcribe that text. You could send that over to OpenAI's GPT-3, classify it as hawkish, and I've done interactive brokers videos that show how to buy put options, and you could YOLO every time he says something hawkish that's classified by GPT-3. Is that crazy? Probably. That's probably a bit of a gamble there, but it's pretty cool how you can take all these concepts and chain them together into something more complex and interesting, right? And if people actually want to see me demonstrate the full example on how you would do that, I'm happy to do that, but I'm not going to recommend anyone try that. It's just one of those crazy ideas you get when you make a lot of financial videos and look at a lot of data. You start to see these weird patterns and think of these crazy things you can do. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot about prompt engineering. In the next video, I'm going to talk more about ChatGPT-3 and code generation. So we're going to use ChatGPT to generate Python code to build a web scraper. And yeah, stay tuned. I got that one coming up. That'll probably come out Friday. So thanks a lot. Happy holidays, everyone. Got my Prince Merry Christmas Prince and the Revolution shirt right there on the motorcycle. So thanks a lot. Bye.